had broken with banners raised and volleys roaring. Yet by midday, the field of Wayna Daga was only half written. Smoke clung to the ridges. The cries of the wounded echoed between valleys, and the rain began to fall as though the heavens themselves mourned what was to come. Both armies still stood. Though bloodied, each side convinced heaven's hand hovered above them. Yet in the storm's heart, fate circled closer. The day was not finished, and the highlands had not yet claimed their greatest sacrifice. As ammunition waned, desperation grew. Some Ottoman musketeers smashed their empty guns against enemy helmets, turning firearms into clubs. Somali horsemen, unable to break the Portuguese squares, feigned retreat only to be cut down in volleys. The sky darkened with clouds, rain beginning to drizzle, turning dust into mud. Horses slipped, wagons bogged down, and yet the Portuguese line never wavered. Imam Ahmad, drenched by the storm, tore the crescent banner from its pole and waved it himself, his voice carrying above thunder. The men rallied once more, driven less by hope of victory than by refusal to abandon him. From the ridges, Bati's lips moved silently, as if her prayers alone might hold back the tide. The rain had thickened into a cold mist, draping the battlefield in a shroud of grey. Imam Ahmad, cloak torn and robe darkened with sweat and blood, rode his warhorse across the front lines. His voice, hoarse but unyielding, rang over the chaos. "Stand firm! Allah tests us here." The crescent banner, once carried high by a standard-bearer, now fluttered in his own hand. He waved it defiantly, its torn edges glowing faintly against the smoke, like fire refusing to die. Men surged behind him, spurred not by orders alone, but by the sight of their commander sharing their peril. Portuguese musketeers, drenched in rain, pressed their match cords into barrels, shielding sparks with their hands. They knew the figure before them, the man called Gragn, the terror of Abyssinia. Some had buried brothers who fell at his command. To them, his life was worth 100 victories. Whispers spread in their square. "There, the devil rides." Jesuit priests shouted blessings, urging them to take aim, declaring that a single shot could change the course of nations. Ahmad's horse crashed forward, hooves striking mud, his sword flashing as he cut through a line of Abyssinian spearmen who dared bar his way. He seemed unstoppable, the embodiment of momentum itself. And yet, in that very momentum, lay his doom. From within the Portuguese square, a survivor of Cristóvão da Gama's last stand steadied his musket. His arms trembled, whether from fear, exhaustion, or the weight of vengeance. He whispered a prayer, not for forgiveness, but for his captain's soul. Then, with a hiss, the match cord met the powder. The cracks split the air like lightning. A single ball tore through the mist and found Ahmad's chest. He jerked in the saddle, the banner slipping from his grip. Blood spread across his robe in a dark bloom. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to stop. Men froze mid-strike, horses reared, even the thunder paused, as though the heavens themselves leaned close. Ahmad's horse screamed and stumbled, throwing him violently to the ground. The impact knocked the breath from him, but not his resolve. He tried to rise, one knee pressing into the mud, sword still clutched in his hand. Those close enough swore they heard his last words, "La ilaha illa Allah, Muhammad Rasul Allah." His lips moved steadily, the shahada spilling into the storm as though it alone could drown the sound of war. Around him, panic rippled through the crescent lines. Commanders shouted, desperate to keep order, but their words fell flat. Soldiers who had followed him through deserts, mountains, and victories now felt the ground give way beneath them. Some tried to lift him, grasping his arms and shoulders, but he pushed them back with what strength remained, insisting that he face his death as a soldier, not as a fallen burden. Others collapsed to their knees, striking their chests, wailing that the light of their jihad had been extinguished. From the ridge, Bati del Wambara saw the moment her husband fell. Her breath caught like a blade in her throat, her body rigid with shock. Yet she did not allow herself the cry that rose within her. Instead, she gripped the hilt of her dagger, holding it so tightly that her knuckles turned white beneath her bronze bangles. In her silence burned a vow. Though she could not reach him through the sea of steel and smoke, her heart carved an oath that his sacrifice would not fade with the rain.
Imami, Imami, Imami Ahmadu كم زومك لحول Harari Amiru تاريخ تدري ما تفتلي ممصونه واتي تكلات شجاع بلا كخو سواري إمام أحمد إبراهيم al-Ghazi براوة بهربم تاريخوني كلاي إمام حاكم بيتي بالسبو أنوكه زاله تتيرارك زاهو فرقي وامرقي لم شخورا من تاشين النار
إمامي 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 عمدو كم زومي كيك له الحراري عميرو
أوركو تاكيل نتخو كم زوم كوبالخو An African hero بايوتا روخو شمبرا كوربيم تاريخ اندلخو تتخوي شاچوبا الفا چوا ماجخو أحمد نقاشليم بيدراويم سستخو
ولدتخو سمم زوبيم وعتيز تراخو شاركي وهربي زوعتي أحد زاشخو وما نتو عباد خولهم شهدوا ممحنخو الموت خومي ممواتي خوني خرامخو واتي قرآن زوبين بيان الشالخو
إمامي 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 أحمدو كمزوم يكيك لهول هراري عميرو تاريخ تدري ما تفتلي ما محمد واتي تكلهت شجادي لاقخو
For the Portuguese, the sight was electric. Cheers erupted, ragged but furious, as musketeers raised their weapons high. To them, the shot had not merely struck a man, it had struck the devil of the highlands. Abyssinian levies surged forward, emboldened by the sight of their greatest enemy in the mud. Priests lifted crucifixes and proclaimed that heaven itself had felled him. Yet on the field itself, the moment was more complicated. For those who had fought closest to him, enemy or ally, a strange hush lingered. Even hardened Portuguese soldiers, their ears ringing with victory, felt the weight of the moment. It was not the fall of a tyrant, nor of a savior. It was the fall of a man who had bent the course of nations. Ahmad lay back at last, eyes fixed on the sky. The rain streaked his face like tears, mingling with the blood that pooled beneath him. His hand released the sword, fingers curling into the mud. His chest heaved once, twice, then stilled. The crescent banner, now lying beside him, soaked in rain and blood, fluttered weakly in the wind as though refusing to bow. The cry went up at last, a cry that carried across ridges and valleys, through friend and foe alike. The Imam is dead. It was not a shout of triumph alone, nor of despair alone. It was the voice of history, marking the end of an age with thunder, blood, and silence. The storm had swallowed the ridges of Wayna Daga. Mist and smoke curled together, veiling the battlefield in shifting shadows. Imam Ahmad pressed forward, his frame scarred yet unbowed, his left hand gripping the crescent banner, his right hand wielding the sword that had carried him through a decade of fire. His warhorse snorted and strained beneath him, mud splattering as its hooves struck stone. Each time the banner rose above the haze, his warriors roared back to life. The Portuguese square bristled ahead, matchlocks braced, pikes angled outward. To them, he was no longer flesh and blood, but the dark legend of Gragn, the scourge who had burned their churches and shattered their lines. Jesuit priests shouted over the wind, "Aim for the devil, strike him down, and heaven will smile." From among the drenched soldiers, one man steadied his musket. He had survived Cristóvão da Gama's last stand, had buried his captain with his own hands. His lips trembled as he whispered, "This ball is for you, Señor." The matchcord kissed powder. The crack tore through the storm. The shot struck Ahmad in the chest. His body jerked backward, blood blooming like fire beneath his robe. The banner slipped, fluttering down into the mud. His horse reared wildly, then stumbled, throwing him to the ground with a sickening crash. For a heartbeat, silence gripped the field. "I saw him fall," one brother would later recall, voice shaking like an old reed. He rose to one knee, hand pressed to his wound, the shahada on his lips. We rushed to lift him, to carry him to safety, but he pushed us away. "Do not hide me," he said. "Let them see I die as I lived, before the eyes of men, before the eyes of God." His blood was warm on my hands. I would have carried him if it killed me, but he would not let me. That was the last order he gave me, and I obeyed. From the opposite side, the man who fired the shot remembered differently. He did not look like a devil when he fell, he confessed years later in Lisbon. He looked human. Blood, mud, and rain made no distinction of faith. When he raised his hand to the sky, I thought he cursed me, but I heard his words carried by the wind. "La ilaha illa Allah." They echoed even as our men cheered. I was told I had saved Abyssinia, that I had done God's work, but in my dreams, I still see his eyes, not furious, but calm, as if he had seen this day, written long ago. One of Ahmad's own Harari soldiers told the story differently again. The ground shook when he fell. I thought the earth itself would break apart. Men cried, some struck their own faces until they bled, others fled into the hills, but I could not move. I crawled to where he lay, close enough to see his lips moving. He whispered the words of faith until the breath left him. I pressed my forehead to the mud beside him, swearing that I would carry his name home, that Harar would never forget. I walked from Wayna Daga barefoot, leaving my sandals by his body. To this day, I have never worn another pair. The final breath, Ahmad's chest heaved once more. Rain mingled with his blood, streaking his face until it seemed the heavens themselves wept over him. His hand opened at last, releasing the sword into the mud. The banner beside him sagged, soaked in crimson. Yet even in the wind, it did not fully bow. It fluttered weakly, as though refusing surrender. The cry rose then, sweeping over both armies. The Imam is dead. For the Abyssinians and their Portuguese allies, it was a cry of deliverance, thunderous and wild. For his followers, it was grief sharper than any blade. And for Bati del Wambara, watching from the ridge with dry eyes and clenched fists, it was the moment her destiny began. Night fell heavy, cloaking the valley in silence, broken only by the moans of the wounded. Galaduas's men sang hymns over the bodies of fallen comrades, their voices echoing through ravines like funeral bells. The Portuguese gathered, kneeling in circles, crossing themselves in gratitude and grief. On the other side, scattered bands of Ahmad's men trudged into darkness, carrying fragments of banners, blades dulled and bent. Bati del Wambara led the retreat, her face unreadable, though every step carried the weight of a widow and a queen-to-be. She swore to herself that his death would not end the struggle. The highlands would remember, and so would she. The soil of Wayna Daga was watered with blood, but from it, legends would grow. Some leaders fall, and their armies scatter. Others fall, and their names become the banners of memory. The death of Imam Ahmad at Wayna Daga ended the advance of Adal, but it did not end his story. To his enemies, he was a scourge. To his people, he was a martyr, a defender, a hero of the Horn. His sacrifice lit a fire that even defeat could not extinguish. The highlands, quiet again, carried his name in the wind. And history, centuries later, still bows to the man who was left-handed, but never left his duty